All right, folks, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, in the interest of time, we really value everyone being here today and taking interest in our region as it pertains to the draft update and review of the RTP update and conformity. My name is Anita Holman Maticio, and again, I thank you for participating in this final round of public outreach for the 2045 RTP update. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everybody participating in today's virtual meeting of the RT Updates webpage, which you can see at the bottom of the screen. Please feel free to join this website at any time where you can place public comments directly, and any comments today will not be considered public comment and instead just discussion. To help ensure accuracy of comments as well as response, we ask that you help us streamline this public comment period by adding your comments to the RTP update webpage or the email, which I also have listed here. So for translation and interpretation services, we do have American Sign Language interpretation available. I'd like to introduce Kala Mata and Z Brazard, who are here with us today. They should be pinned at the top of your screen and signing for you now. If for some reason you cannot see them, we invite you to click on the top right hand of the video and click pin video. This will allow the interpreters to remain at the top of the screen and pinned for you. We also have additional language assistance in Spanish, Vietnamese, and Mandarin Chinese. And with that, I'd like each of the interpreters to introduce themselves as well as provide additional instruction. And with that, Ms. Wendy Almazan, if you can start us off.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Wendy Almanzán y soy su intérprete de español para la reunión. Si tiene alguna pregunta o comentario, puede escribirlo en el cuadro de chat.
大家好，我叫卓伟杰，提供本次会议的中文普通话翻译。如果您需要中文翻译，您可以通过 Zoom 中的举手键，我会帮助您进行翻译，或者您也可以通过 Chat Box 对话栏提出相应的翻译要求。谢谢。Thanks.
Wonderful. And if there's another language that you need assistance with, if you'll please let us know, we can definitely follow up through the chat, as well as follow up with you individually if needed. So just as a quick reminder, you may have heard me say it once before, but this meeting will be recorded and placed on the RTP update webpage. During this presentation, we ask that all comments, questions, etc., actually be placed in our chat box. This is about a 35 to 40-minute presentation, and so we don't want you to forget what your discussion point might be, so please use that as your tool. During discussion, when we get to the discussion phase of today's presentation, we ask you to raise your hand if you need further clarification on one of our responses. Staff will unmute you to allow you to speak, and then when you're done, we ask you to lower your hand so that we can go ahead and work our way through today's discussion. All right, so with that, I'm going to start our formal presentation. So good evening, my name is Anita Holman Maticio, and I'd like to welcome you to the Regional Transportation Plan Update and Conformity virtual public meeting. Today's virtual meeting is part of our public review period, which began March 15th and will run until April 17th. As mentioned, today's presentation will be recorded and made available on our RTP update webpage, which you can find at hgac/RTP. And I will be sure to remind you of this website at the conclusion of today's presentation. Today's presentation is provided as a summary of the Regional Transportation Plan update, where we have intentionally used the same images and graphics and data you'll find in the draft report itself. The presentation will be, as I mentioned, approximately 35 to 40 minutes, and we ask that you place all questions, screenshots, etc. in the Zoom chat to memorialize your questions, which we will address at the end of today's presentation. There's a lot of great information to discuss this evening, so we really appreciate your your patience and participation. As a quick reminder, your questions today will not serve as official public comment, but as discussion for today's virtual meeting. Formalized public comments must be submitted through the RTP update webpage or by email, which again, I will repeat at the end of today's presentation. This is just a quick presentation outline you see here, and it's intended to mimic the RTP update report, which is now available for public review and comment. We will quickly go over what HGAC is, including the Regional Transportation Plan. We'll go over our public outreach summary, associated vision, goals, and desired outcomes. We'll then move into our transportation system as it relates to our challenges and opportunities. We'll talk about investment strategies, as well as anticipated federal and state revenues. And then finally, we'll talk about our air quality conformity. So what is HGAC and the RTP? Like every major metropolitan area in the country, our region has a Metropolitan Planning Organization, or an MPO. Here, we call it the Houston-Galveston Area Council, or HGAC. The HGAC MPO is composed of 8 counties, which are summarized on the slide. HGAC's mission is to work with regional partners to plan the orderly growth and development of the region, to build region-wide consensus on improving transportation, promoting growth, protecting the environment, enhancing the economy, and fostering equity, and to develop the region's transportation policies, as well as oversee planning and programming of transportation infrastructure investments. The RTP helps achieve the mission of HGAC. For those who don't know, the RTP is a federally required, physically constrained long-range planning document updated every 4 years, which guides major transportation investments through the year 2045. This plan describes the region's vision, goals, and implementation strategies. It also describes the current conditions and desired future transportation system. Now let's quickly review our public outreach summary to date. The first step of the RTP updating process was the visioning phase. Public meetings were conducted from May through July of 2022 to understand the public's needs through surveying. The prioritization phase followed with public meetings in October through December of 2022. This phase gathered feedback on the big ideas and investment strategies to address what we heard during the visioning phase. We are now entering the public outreach phase that kicked off March 15th to remain open until April 17th to allow the public to review the draft RTP update and conformity document and provide public comment prior to these items being approved by the Transportation Policy Council in April. As mentioned, from May through July 2022, HGAC conducted visioning outreach. This included in-person meetings in each of the 8 MPO counties and a virtual meeting in early June. The purpose of the visioning outreach was to encourage participation in the visioning survey to help us understand how respondents get around the region, what they like and did not like about travel, what their trade-offs and preferences are related to transportation, and what influences housing choices. What we heard is that respondents wanted to travel safer and not necessarily faster. Regarding mobility, those inside Beltway 8 wanted better quality roads that accommodate a variety of travel options, such as walking and biking and transit. Those outside Beltway 8 had greater concerns with congestion and want a shorter commute. This could either be in distance or time. It was noted by those respondents outside Beltway 8 that public transportation is not conveniently accessible. In general, congestion or reliable travel times was a primary concern we heard throughout the region, as was respondents' preference for affordable living and the desire to be within proximity of work, shopping, and other services. The prioritization outreach was conducted later in 2022, from October to December, which focused on presenting visioning survey results and gathering feedback through polling and surveying on planning strategies related to safety, reliability, equity, and livability. The 6 planning strategies presented to the public received overwhelming support for those who participated in this outreach. Regarding safety, a supermajority of participants supported the region's Vision Zero policy. Participants also supported development of a congestion management plan to prioritize reduction in region's vehicle miles traveled. There was also strong support for a regional complete streets policy, as well as continued use of both virtual and in-person outreach opportunities. Next, let's discuss the RTP update's vision, goals, and desired outcomes. The vision, goals, and desired outcomes are provided on this table. The previously verbose statement has been modified to be a more succinct statement and aligns with the region's goals and strategies. Adhering to the RTP's vision for a safe, resilient, equitable, and reliable multimodal transportation system that contributes to a livable region, desired outcomes include a transportation network by the year 2045 that results in 0 fatalities, assets that are in good condition, reliable commuting options and incident response times, reliable freight movement with options other than driving alone, and minimal impacts to the environment and historic integrity. The provided graphic you see here helps illustrate details presented on the previous slide with the overarching vision statement at the top and at the point of this spectrum associated goals and desired outcomes in simple terms. Now let's dive into HGAC's transportation system, challenges, and opportunities as summarized in the RTP update report and associated appendices. The 2020 census tells us that our region's household population is now about 7 million, which is a 20% increase in the last 10 years from the 2010 census. Based on regional model projections, this total will grow by 50% in the next 25 years. Jobs are also estimated to grow. The total number will most likely increase mostly in Harris County, followed by Montgomery County. And regionally, the increase is 36% over the next 25 years. This level of regional growth presents planning challenges for local and state governments, especially for transportation planning, including serving the needs of an aging population and aging infrastructure. The next set of maps will show the regional distribution and intensity of existing and forecasted population and job totals, which helps inform existing and forecasted commuting patterns. At a granular level, using 3-mile grids over the region, most of the population in the western part of the region is concentrated between I-10 and I-69 inside of South Highway 99. This area accounts for 12% of the region's population. By 2045, this trend doesn't appear to change, as much of the area's populations greater than 80,000 are within the same western side of the region inside of South Highway 99. You can see that there is a significant growth in the western portion of the region from Montgomery around to Fort Bend and Brazoria counties. When looking at the total jobs within the region, 20% are inside the 610 loop in 2020, which is a significant number. By 2045, most jobs are projected to continue to be inside the loop, with some growth in the western portion of the region inside South Highway 99. The projected change in jobs is inside South Highway 99 and mostly between US 290 and I-10, with some modest growth along South Highway 288. Here are some of the commute flows for 2020 and forecasted for 2045 based on our population and employment data. This is very similar to what we shared on the earlier slide, where most of the region's populations live outside and west of the Beltway and then work inside the Beltway, but still on the western side. This does not change significantly by 2045, as growth is concentrated in the same general areas. Looking at the change in trips to work from 2020 to 2045, the greatest increase in trips is outside South Highway 99 in the northwest area of the region, traveling to the energy corridor, the area inside South Highway 99 along I-10. The largest decrease is from the same energy corridor area to the downtown of Houston. The draft RTP update describes the current transportation system by summarizing the essence of the existing network with the challenges and opportunities that have been mentioned throughout this public outreach. For roadways, the Conformity Network and Congestion Management Network are highlighted graphically, demonstrating the subset from the National Highway Network and managed lanes. Disaster preparedness and evacuation routes are described in this section, and for those of us who have experienced a disaster in our region, know the challenges of safety, congestion, connectivity, and condition of facility. The graphic on the right shows the 2020 levels of congestion and higher volume roadways. The 2045 condition will be shown at the end of this presentation to demonstrate the need for a regional congestion management. The next section of the report is the action plan. Within the action section of the report, all capital projects are summarized and aggregated into major corridors and 5 subregions. These include roadway, highway, and other construction projects. The graphic on the right shows current driving times in green from the Sharpstown area. With all investments anticipated in this RTP update, it can be seen here in orange that by 2045, the distance that can be reached in 45 minutes by driving are actually reduced, requiring more travel time to reach the same areas than today. We do have maps for other areas around the region, which will be included in the appendix for further review. Regarding public transportation, the existing network is described with challenges and opportunities. We did hear during our visioning outreach that those outside the Beltway did not have convenient access to public transportation, and that's noted in the RTP update. Also noted is the investment in public transportation through the Metro Next Moving Forward plan. The action plan includes a summary of transit investments in the corridor and sub-regional section. Staff coordinated with the HGAC's Regional Transit Coordination Subcommittee to discuss the map on the right and the bullet points you see here. As you see, unlike roadway travel times, there is some gain in distance reached in 45 minutes via transit. However, there's still a need to reach further outside of Beltway 8. This can be addressed with the planning strategies devoted to scenario planning, including studying, This can be addressed with planning strategies devoted to scenario planning, including studies of options to service outside Beltway 8 and explore housing, commercial, and other development opportunities around prioritized transit centers. The existing network challenges and opportunities for active transportation is also included in the RTP. And it should be noted that there is a dedicated funding source for active transportation within HGAC's project selection process. The action plan also notes the need to update the active transportation plan to identify specific priority projects to utilize this dedicated funding source and realize the vision for pedestrian and bicycle networks to safely accommodate everyone with a well-connected and well-maintained system. The Regional Goods Movement Plan is currently being updated, where the Houston-Galveston region is one of the busiest freight networks in the United States. Challenges include 10 of 100 most congested freight corridors being in our region, as well as a noted 1,619 at-grade rail crossings. To help alleviate these challenges, HGAC identified a dedicated funding source for regional good movement as part of the project selection process, and an effort to improve safety for at-grade rail crossings is currently underway with groups such as the Houston Area Rail Transformation Working Group, or HART. Again, the recommendation of the action plan includes existing capital projects in the corridor and sub-regional section and will be updated once the Regional Goods Movement Plan is complete. Aviation is a new asset discussed in this plan. There are 2 commercial airports and a spaceport identified in our region, along with a note on the Texas Transportation Commission's Urban Air Mobility Committee's recommendations. The action plan includes the roadway and transit projects currently identified to improve access for passengers and cargo to the intercontinental and hobby airports. Similarly, there are ferry operations in the new RTP update. The 2 ferry operations, which include Galveston and Lynchburg, are briefly described along with funding sources for those operations. Needs for terminal improvements, ferry replacements, and additions are included in the major corridor and sub-regional investment sections. And parking is also a new asset in the plan. Best practices in parking management, the regional park and ride facilities, and commercial truck parking are described along with their associated challenges and opportunities. Planning strategy to evaluate park and ride facilities are included in the high capacity transit element, and recommendations for commercial vehicle parking would be part of the freight and regional goods movement recommendations once finalized. The next section of the draft RTP update includes corridor and sub-regional investments. As mentioned, capital project investments are aggregated into major corridors in 5 sub-regional areas and other regional programs. The RTP will summarize these areas by type of investment and amount to be expended on projects in these areas. Detailed summary sheets as well as are also provided within the RTP's appendix. For the region, this chart shows about $100 billion in investments devoted to a variety of projects that are either being built now, funded to be built, or there's still refining of the scope and design at the planning and engineering stages. Almost 98% of funding is devoted to general roadway or transit, and that funding is fairly evenly split between those facility types. Now we move into planning strategies as mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. As a quick reminder, these are the 6 planning strategies conferred by the public during the prioritization phase, which received overwhelming support as previously mentioned at the start of this presentation. Now let's discuss each strategy. Our challenge with safety are that facilities and serious injuries are trending in the wrong direction. They occur at intersections and involve pedestrians. We heard from survey respondents that they overwhelmingly prefer to travel safer and not necessarily faster. To address this need, the region has adopted a Vision Zero policy to support transportation investments that strive to reduce regional traffic fatalities to zero by the year 2050. To achieve this goal, a safe system approach will be utilized to guide the culture of designing and implementing facilities to incorporate all mobility needs and to reduce the risk and severity of injuries. These principles and approaches will be memorialized in an update of the Regional Safety Action Plan. We heard that congestion is a primary concern when traveling in and around our region. As promised earlier, on the right is a map of the levels of congestion within the current RTP recommended projects. As you can see, by 2045, there is severe congestion anticipated, even with current proposed improvements. To address this, the region could develop a congestion management plan, which goes beyond our current process and prioritizes projects that specifically reduce the region's vehicle miles traveled and improve access to jobs in areas that are experiencing significant bottlenecks and delays. The RTP also recommends development of a regional resiliency improvement plan to identify and prioritize specific improvement projects in areas of the system that are critical and currently vulnerable to storm events. Staff will also use time to actively participate in statewide and region-wide resiliency working groups. Equity is an important topic. The challenge is understanding impacts and underinvestments to vulnerable and underserved populations. We heard that residents inside the Beltway and lower income groups overwhelmingly want more travel options, and those outside the Beltway want shorter commutes. We also have a goal of minimizing impacts to the environment and cultural and historic resources. The RTP does include a recommendation to develop a regional equity policy to guide how investments will align with identified needs and to evaluate alternative scenarios as part of the transportation planning process. The action plan includes a section called Livability to provide a variety of options for mobility and housing and to ensure investments in high growth areas. We heard that proximity to jobs, services, and healthcare is important, as is having a variety of options. Developing a regional complete streets prioritization plan is now something the region will need to do to improve safety, mobility, and accessibility of the street. Prioritizing transit centers for transit-oriented development will ensure residents have access to a variety of housing options within the proximity to job services while providing additional travel options. Utilizing best practices and scenario planning is also something that's included within the analytics section of this action plan. Evaluating various land use and transportation investments will be necessary and will inform other activities within this action plan, such as the congestion mitigation plan. Evaluating the array of outcomes under various scenarios will be critical to pursuing the desired outcome that best aligns with the RTP's vision. The success of this plan and associated vision, goals, and planning strategies is not possible without you. The draft RTP recommends updating the public participation plan to include best practices in both virtual and in-person public participation, and to address one of the weaknesses of this process outreach effort, which is ensuring that vulnerable populations have better awareness and opportunity to participate in the transportation planning process. The action plan chapter will address emerging technologies and demonstrate physical constraint and air quality conformity. The constraint and conformity topics will be discussed in subsequent slides to follow. For emerging technologies, there is a section on electronic vehicle infrastructure that recommends installation of a variety of locations, including TxDOT's alternative fuel corridors. And with every planning best practice, there is a recommendation to collect and analyze usage to further understand future development. Autonomous and connected vehicles are also included in the RTP update, with a recommendation to develop a strategic plan, educate public officials and the general public about associated benefits, and to explore opportunities for early development of the autonomous and connected vehicle operations. Next, I'd like to briefly discuss anticipated funding sources. Over the time frame of the 2045 RTP update, the total estimated revenue by source are forecasted to be $141 billion, as demonstrated by the pie chart you see on the left. In terms of transportation investment expenditures, the 2045 RTP update recommends $109 billion in the year of expenditure dollars, and as you can see on the right, divided in the pie chart by project type. The anticipated revenue are more than what is needed to cover the expenditures of the 2045 RTP update. And now I'd like to hand the presentation over to Graciela, who will be detailing more information regarding the air quality conformity. And with that, Dr. Graciela Livability, excuse me, the presentation is yours.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I am Graciela Livability, like Anita just said, and I am with the Data Analytics and Research Department here at HGAC. And today I'm going to present the results of their quality conformity determination. Next slide, please. Okay, our agency, the Houston-Galveston Area Council, is in charge of the transportation plans. The regional transportation plan, that is the long-range transportation plan that covers about 20 years, and what is called the Transportation Improvement Program, that is the short range of the transportation plan and is the first 4 years of the RTP. Both of these plans need to be fiscally constrained. Next slide, please. Also, our region is in non-attainment for the 8-hour ozone standard. And our region was reclassified on November 7 of 2022 by EPA from, was reclassified from serious to severe for the 2008 8-hour ozone standard set up at 75 parts per billion with attainment year 2026. And it was also reclassified from marginal to moderate for the 2015 8-hour ozone standard that is set up at 70 parts per billion. And the attainment year for this standard is 2023. based on these reclassifications, now the state environmental agency, TCEQ, needs to develop new air quality SIPs for these classifications. Next slide, please. This slide just shows how the concentration of ozone has been changing through the years. And you can see that it has been decreasing a lot for the first decade of the 2000s, and now it's kind of fluctuating with reading an average value of 78 parts per billion. And that's the reason why we are not attainment, why we are in non-attainment for these two ozone standards. Next slide, please. So what is conformity? Conformity is the link between the air quality state implementation plan and the regional transportation plan, and ensures that the transportation plans do not delay the attainment of the national ambient air quality standards. Next slide, please. So the emissions of the transportation plans must conform to the emission budgets coming from the air quality state implementation plan. The latest emission budgets approved by EPA are the reasonable further progress budgets from mobile sources that were found adequate by EPA on June 9, 2021 for the serious classification. And these emission budgets are for on-road mobile sources, and are because if they were for the serious classification, they were for the year 2020, and are for nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds because they are the ozone precursors. As you know, ozone is not being emitted, it's being formed in the atmosphere by chemical reactions between nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds. Next slide, please. This slide I added just to add more content to see that this is data actually coming from TCEQ, the Environmental Protection Agency from the state, and is all these anthropogenic sources, all the emission inventories from anthropogenic sources for volatile organic compounds, VOCs, or nitrogen oxides, also called NOx. And you can see that for on-road mobile, that is from the emissions coming from the transportation plan, is about 7% of the whole pie for volatile organic compounds, and about 22% for nitrogen oxides, with the biggest contributor for volatile organic compounds are area sources. That area sources, by definition from TCEQ, are agricultural sources, waste management, commercial sources, and solvent use, because these are highly unregulated sources. And for nitrogen oxides, the biggest contributor are the non-road mobile sources, that is mainly construction equipment, mining equipment, agricultural equipment, lawn and garden equipment, and aircraft and airport equipment, locomotives, and commercial and marine vessels, and also highly unregulated. Next slide, please. So the reason of this conformity determination is, like Anita just said, is because every 4 years we need to update our regional transportation plan. And in our case, August 2nd of 2023 will start the next cycle, our next 4 years. So this is the reason of this conformity. And although we didn't add it to the transportation plan, new regional significant projects, we need to show conformity to the new non-attainment designations of the ozone standards that we have been reclassified for the years 2023 and 2026. Next slide, please. So the conformity is a calculation process that is done using air quality models. And for these calculations, we used to use the latest planning assumptions, also the latest emission model approved by EPA, that in this case is MOOPS 3.1. We also need to have interaction consultations like with EPA, Federal Highways, TCQ, TxDOT, and Metro. We need to have a public comment period, and we need to have also timely implementation of control measures if they are included in their quality state implementation plan. And conformity is demonstrated when the projected emissions coming from the RTP do not exceed the region motor vehicle emission budgets stated in their quality state implementation plan. Next slide, please. So for the conformity calculations, we needed to select the years of the calculations according to the conformity rule. So according to the conformity rule, you always need to calculate the attainment years. So in this case, the years 2023 and 2026 needed to be calculated. Then the year 2045 also needed to be calculated because it's the horizon year of the plan. And because of the conformity years for the calculations cannot be more than 10 years apart, then we needed to add intermediate years. In this case, we added the years 2040 and 2030. And for the latest planning, the latest planning available that we update our data from is we were using now new compliance factors for inspection and maintenance programs, and new adjustment factors for vehicle miles travel and fuel data. And of course, we use the air quality model, the most recent air quality model that is the EPA MOOPS 3.1. Next slide, please. The new air quality model from EPA also accounts for new regulations, and in this case, it's for the new greenhouse gas regulations for fuel efficiency standards for medium and heavy duty engines, and for the safer and affordable fuel efficient vehicles rule. Next slide, please. So this slide shows our calculations highlighted in green for all the years that we did the calculations versus the emission budgets. And you can see that we pass the conformity test, since the emissions coming from the transportation plan are lower than the emission budgets coming from the air quality state implementation plan for the serious classification for the 8-hour ozone standard, for the 2008 8-hour ozone standard. Next slide, please. So this is our timeline. Right now we are in our public comment period. That our public comment period started on March 15 and finished April 17. Today is our public meeting. And in April, we are planning to do to write our responses to the public comments and to go to the TAC and TPC, our Transportation Policy Council, for approval. And then after that, we will send all the documentation that we have for conformity and for the RTP to our consultation partners that are EPA, TCQ, Federal Highway, TxDOT, and Metro, and we will send them for review and for comment. We hope probably to get approval more or less in 3 months, previous to the August 2nd deadline. So here you can see, it's highlighted the website for the transportation conformity if anybody wants to review the documentation. Well, thank you very much. This concludes my presentation. Let me know if you have any comments or questions.
Thank you for the overview on conformity. And then just for everybody listening in today, the public outreach period for the RTP update and conformity are following the same timeline. And we are asking today that you help us get the word out within our region that we are in the midst of our public engagement. Again, that runs from March 15th to April 17th. Tonight, we have included the presentation portion for the virtual public meeting. As a reminder, this recording is going to be placed on the public website that you see here, which is hgac.com/RTP. On that website, again, that is where you can submit formal comments that will be responded to by HGAC and then published. If for some reason that link is inaccessible to you or you're not able to retrieve the associated report and appendices, please reach out to us and let us know. We can always find a way to get those to you. But we also want to point out that public comments can be submitted via email at publiccomments@hgac.com. And with that, the additional thing we'd like to help in terms of helping us advertise, staff is going to be placing in our chat, and it looks like we may be adding that now, but staff is going to be placing 2 handouts. One is a 1-pager that kind of explains, it's front and back, and it explains, you know, what is the RTP update, what is HGAC, and a kind of a quick overview of what you might find in the update as well as conformity. And then the other thing we have are just associated postcards, where the postcard can be emailed or handed out as you see fit. Again, we are trying to reach the entire region. Aside from this virtual public meeting, we are also attending festivals throughout all 8 of the counties. We've already been to the Houston Rodeo, for example, and so you might see us out and about. And we ask you to stop by, say hello, ask the tough questions, and help us get the word out. So with that, I promised a 40-minute presentation. We're right at 6:42.